what I'll do is quickly run through the current state of play as it is now in the 6th Community Pharmacy Agreement, and then we'll commence into the 7th Agreement negotiations before I hand back to Chris to do the Queensland inquiry. This particular graph here I like because I love data. I'm a bit of a data nerd, and remember, without data all we do is have strong opinions, and the one thing I've learnt since becoming your president is that's one thing we are not short of in the pharmacy profession. The highest growing area percentage-wise in our dispensaries is the general under copay market. No surprise to all of us that are running our own pharmacies, given it is off a small base. But what this graph articulates is the area of pressure or market competition that exists in the under copay market. So if you just have a look, the blue line is if I charged all allowable fees, right? The orange line is the actual real retail price that the consumer gets. So remember, since the 5th Community Pharmacy Agreement, we've been giving all data in the general under copayment to the government. So the government knows, right, how much we are actually charging. Okay, so when we look at why did the 60-day dispensing thing come about, well, they know, right, in the general under copay market what we're charging for the atorvastatins and for the clopidogrels and for the angiotensins and the ACE inhibitors, and then they know what they're paying us the full rack rate for in the concession and pension market. So they compare and go, well, hang on, when there's competition, the price is actually a lot lower. So why is it? Right? Why is it that we're paying for all of these allowable fees when in effect, when market forces exist, we don't actually charge them? So the other point I want you to take home from this side is the line of best fit. So if you look at your left-hand side, my right, so that end of the screen, the line of best fit is actually quite steeper. Okay, so allowable fees and even market is actually decreasing over time at a much higher rate. If you look at the line of best fit for the latter years, closer to my end of the screen, it's flattened out, okay, which means price disclosure and competition is settling down in the general under copay market. But what I also want you to see is the gap. The gap's widening, okay? So even though it's settling down and the market is finding some form of equilibrium, the gap between what we can charge and what we actually do is getting wider. Meaning those of us that never used to discount in the general under copay market are now finding that we have to be able to remain competitive. This one here is the size of the under copay market. So remember, and the reason I'm focusing on this is because it gives you an understanding of where the government is thinking in respects to trends for where we're going to be at the end of the 7th Community Pharmacy Agreement. So there were 76.8 million general under copay prescriptions in the first year of the current agreement, and that is expected to climb to 104 million in the 1920 financial year that was starting next week. Small base, but huge growth rates, all right? This one here I found extremely interesting. We've all heard of Pareto's principle, okay? 80% of our turnover comes from 20% of our customers. In fact, what the Guild data and the Guild Digest data is showing is it's actually far more pronounced than that. So the top 20%, of customers account for 7.14% of the entire gross profit of the business. Or let's go down to the bottom one. My top 100 customers, which are by no means 20% of my customer base, account for a whopping 22.9% of my gross profit. So let's just round that for the purposes of this argument. My top 100 customers account for a quarter of all gross profit dollars. As you know, gross profit and net profit are completely different things. Who here has a net profit of 25%? But the entire bottom line, if we're taking an outcome from this, the entire bottom line of all of our businesses comes from our top 100 customers. That's what this slide says, right? Now, if you knew the entire net profit of your business came from 100 people, how much attention do you give to those top 100 people? Because of all the effort you go through for opening the pharmacy in the morning, closing it at night, trading it 7 days a week, for 365 days or 360 days a year, 52 weeks of the year, how much effort do you put into the 100 people that delivered the entire net profit of your whole business? And when I have the conversation with Georgina and our business partners, the answer is, well, probably not enough, right? Probably not enough. Now, on the Guild training website, so on Guild Edge, you will find that there is a training module for how to look after your top 100 customers. So that's your first takeaway for tonight. If you haven't done that, or you haven't got your pharmacist managers, your pharmacists in charge, your dispensary technicians and your retail managers to do that training module, remember it's free for all Guild members, then you should refer them to that module and they should all do that module. Now remember, I asked Georgina and I asked my business partners, what do we do for our top 100 customers? Because we've got a top 100 customer strategy, don't we? Oh, of course we do, Trent. So what do? Well, I flag them in Fred so they appear red, right? I make sure I've got their scripts on file, fantastic, and I send them a Christmas card. That's it. That's the sophistication of the Toomey Pharmacy Group top 100 patient strategy. Now, if I owned a hardware store or I was a mechanic, I think that they would have a far more sophisticated strategy for looking up their top 100 customers that are responsible for the entire net profit of their whole business. Now, the next slides I'm going to go into are those funded programs, funnily enough, and those private programs that are currently available to you that we are doing a pretty poor job at utilising to build loyalty for those top 100 customers. So this is the 6 CPA. Now, the number one professional program in the community pharmacy agreement is not dose administration aids or meds checks or diabetes meds checks, it's the dispensing fee, right? It is the number one professional service that we deliver. The AHI is the supply fee, the dispensing fee is the professional service fee. So it is the number one professional program that we have. Now, you all heard George and I when we did this roadshow, and we did it over in the building just behind us when we signed the 6 community pharmacy agreement, we said it was an $18.9 billion deal. Now, that $18.9 billion was made up of the money that comes to us, including the dispensing fees and the professional programs, and it's also the money that goes to wholesalers. So in rough terms, it's about $2.77 billion was going to the wholesalers, $1.263 billion going to professional programs, and the balancing $14.9 odd billion was going to dispensing. The wholesalers will bank every dollar of their $2.77 billion, which is their 7.52% markup and their CSO. So remember all the wholesalers in the Stephen King review were saying the Guild threw us under the bus and we didn't get what we're entitled to and we're not going to get all the money we were promised. They will bank every single dollar. They've been kept whole. They're looked after. The programs, as you know, they're a capped environment. Okay, so they will be fully expended. We will utilise all professional service funds in the 6 community pharmacy agreement. The dispensing income, though, is running 1.9, let's call it $2 billion under budget. So we're not going to have an $18.9 billion deal. We're going to have more like a $16.9 billion deal. Now, remember how when we did that AHI trade-off for the risk share and they gave us $200 million? So for $2 billion less in volumes, $2 billion less of AHIs and dispensing fees, they gave us $200 million in compensation. Okay, and that's what that increase was in the AHI. So the problem was we didn't have a risk share. Now, George spoke at length about our conversations with not just Greg, but also with ScoMo and also with Frydenberg. And we have in writing, signed by the Minister for Health, Greg Hunt, and signed by the Prime Minister, that a deal with the Coalition is a deal, and whatever deal they sign, they will guarantee it and they will deliver it in full. And that is code for we will give you a risk share. Now, I believe nothing until they've signed it, and I believe nothing until I receive the first check. But we do have, in principle, an agreement with the government that the 7th Community Pharmacy Agreement will include a risk share. So if they promise an $18.9 billion deal, we will receive an $18.9 billion deal. Now, I spoke to you about those top 100 customers delivering 22.7%, let's call it a quarter, of all gross profit dollars, or the entire bottom line of my community pharmacy. So these are the funded program fees in the 6 community pharmacy agreement that are indexed in real CPI figures each and every year of the community pharmacy agreement. So a HMR, for those of you that may not have checked because it might not be something that you utilise, is now nearly $223. A meds check is nearly $67. A diabetes meds check, it's $100 now. Stage supply is also being indexed and dose administration aids have gone up to $6.17. So CPI is something that, yes, whilst we deserve it, yes, whilst it is an expectation, is not something we've always had. Those of you that remember the 5th Community Pharmacy Agreement and the 4th Community Pharmacy Agreement, we either had no indexation for the life of the agreement, or we forewent it for 3 or 4 years of the 5-year deal. We have had indexation not to WCI 9, not to some other arbitrary measure of inflation, but to full headline CPI each and every year of this agreement. And all of these programs, what they are to lock in those top 100 customers, to lock in all of the AHIs and all of the dispensing fees that those prescriptions bring from those top 100 people. So they're worth infinitely more than each of these isolated occasions of service. It's worth the loyalty that you're locking in with all of those patients. Clinical interventions, I have to say that one is the easiest one to deliver. If you're not doing that, I'd have to ask why you're not participating, because 3.5% of your claimable prescription volume, and you receive approximately $3.21 per clinical intervention. It's a fixed pot of money that's divided up every quarter. So depending on how successful we are as a profession in claiming, that figure could fluctuate. Okay, but that on average is what the value of a clinical intervention has been. As I said, I love figures. I always get asked, why is it the Guild, and I always love keyboard warriors from consultant pharmacists that like to pay me out personally, or the Guild, and say, why is it that the Guild won't increase the cap? So I just want to touch on caps for a moment, because in Nirvana, in an ideal world, there would be no arbitrary caps. It would just be based on clinical need, okay? And someone that presents with a clinical need would receive a clinical service. Wouldn't that be fantastic? Fact of the matter is, we have $1.263 billion to last 5 years, which means if we have a 5-year cap, we have an annual cap. If we have an annual cap, it means you've got 12 monthly caps. So it's just the reality that we live in. Now the thing is other than the dispensing fee, which 5,700 pharmacies are participating in because it's the most successful clinical program we deliver, dose administration aids is the second most successful program in terms of the number of Australians receiving them and the number of pharmacies delivering them. So out of 5,700 pharmacies, 5,400 pharmacies are delivering dose administration aids. So people say, Trent, why does the Guild have a bias towards dose administration aids? Well, it's quite simple, because it gets spread the furthest. Most Australians get to access them because most pharmacies are delivering them. And it is the professional service that is the most closely linked to the dispensing function. We have other sister organisations that shall remain nameless that are advocating for some of these programs to be carved out and delivered through general practice. Boo, hiss, right? This one can't be, because it must be delivered through the community pharmacy that is providing the dispensing of those medicines, right? So that is why that one is our favourite. It is the most closely linked to dispensing, so it cannot be carved out and lost to other elements of the profession, and it increases compliance, right? If it increases compliance, not only does it increase the quality use of medicines, but it also increases the amount of dispensing fees and AHIs that I receive. Clinical interventions, 1,000 pharmacies aren't doing them. And I just have to scratch my head at why 1,000 pharmacies aren't bothering submitting once a quarter clinical intervention data. You know, on one hand, I could say it's money for jam, right? On the other hand, I could say by not providing that data set, you're not getting remunerated $3.21 each time you do that clinical occasion of service, but also you're not providing the Guild with the data that we can use for the evolution of further professional programs. So do yourself a favour and claim, because it's not that difficult, but do the profession a favour and give us the data so we can help evolve further professional services. Meds checks. Meds checks and HMRs are the ones I get the most amount of complaints about why the caps are so low. But here's the facts, all right? Because we love to deal in facts, not opinions. Half of pharmacies are participating in meds checks. By definition, it means for the life of the 6th agreement, you've claimed one, right? One. The other half have never claimed a meds check. Never claimed a meds check. Now let's go down the bottom here. 22% of the pharmacies that are claiming, meaning 22% of the 2,800, so 11% of the network are hitting their cap. So when people say to me, why aren't you increasing the cap? Firstly, there's no money. Secondly, why would I give more to 11%, right? When I have to worry about the viability. That's my role. I'm the chairman of pharmacy, viability. My role is to ensure that you are all viable. And remember, the purpose of this program is not to keep your businesses viable. The purpose for this program is to deliver them to 26 million Australians who may have a clinical need, right? Which means I need them available through 5,700 pharmacies, not 11%. right? So until that base gets higher, until the 2,800 starts looking more like 5,700, until the 11% starts looking more like 50%, we're not going to increase the cap, right? Because it needs to be spread out, because the government wants these to be available to all Australians. Let's go further. Pain meds check. Only 1,600 pharmacies registered. Now, for the chronic pain meds check, we have a massive underspend, so much so that there are now no longer caps. So these things are worth $100 a throw, right? Green notes, pass them out, all right? And only 1,600 people wanted to participate. So we opened up another 200 sites, and that closed yesterday or the day before. I'm looking at somebody. So I'm hoping some people signed up to participate in that program. But now it is uncapped. So if you're one of those 1,800 pharmacies that are participating, you now have an uncapped chronic pain meds check trial. So go for gold, go until September. They're $100 a throw. You can do as many of them a day as you can fit in. I only say that in Queensland. We don't worry about saying that in other states. How good is Queensland, Mr. President? Stage supply, 1,738 pharmacies are claiming, and HMRs, here's the kicker, friends, out of 32,000, and it's just under that, 31,800 and something, but let's call it 32,000 registered pharmacists in Australia, only 1,300 pharmacies offer this service. So when people whinge that I can't make a living out of a DAA cap because it's not enough for me to provide a service, firstly, the HMR program is not there to provide you a living wage. The HMR program is there to provide consults to people with a clinical need. The first thing is we need 5,700 pharmacies providing HMRs, not 1,300. So we're not going to increase the cap. If we have more money, we're going to want to spread it out and encourage enrolment. I just want to pause here for a moment, because is anyone in the room HMR accredited? One, two people. We have 2 accredited, so that just shows that figure, right? The issue is we should all be HMR accredited. Now the thing is HMRs didn't exist when I registered, okay? And I'm not that old. So if HMRs didn't exist, vaccinations certainly didn't. But vaccinations are a great example. How many people are vaccination accredited? Much better, fantastic. So the thing is all new graduates, the Guild has an opinion, right, and a view, that to create universal access of professional programs, whether it be vaccinations, whether it be meds checks or HMRs, all pharmacists need to be able to perform these services, because we need 26 million Australians having access to these, whether they're in Brisbane or Bamaga or Cairns or Corumba, right? So we need all new graduates that come out to be able to vaccinate. We need all new graduates that come out able to do a HMR. Now, for the rest of us that didn't have the skills and knowledge to perform the tasks of these things when we did our programs, we need some form of course we can go and do to retrofit us, right? To give us that gap of skills and knowledge so we can perform these new tasks. So I don't have a problem with becoming HMR accredited or doing my vaccination course. What I have a real problem with is the crappy red tape and fees that I have to do every year to remain accredited, right? You don't see a GP having to go and prove they can put the pointy end in the person's arm every year. Once they graduate and they're accredited, it becomes part of their CPD cycle, right? And so when they do their annual education plan, they need to make sure that they remain relevant for whatever field of practice, whether it's compounding chemotherapy in a private hospital, or whether it's performing vaccinations in my community pharmacy, or whether it's doing HMRs or RMMRs in a residential aged care facility. These things are no different. The whole AACP process is unnecessary red tape and is an unnecessary financial burden on pharmacists, and the whole thing should be blown up, right? Because that's the only way we feel we're going to remove the restrictions to get 1,300 up to 5,700. So any 26 million Australian can walk into any pharmacy and say, I need a HMR. And the pharmacist should all be able to go, I can do that for you. DAAs. So 5,400 pharmacies out of 5,700 are participating. Again, it's that magic 11%. It's off a higher base, right? Only 11% of pharmacies are hitting their cap. That doesn't mean 11% are doing 200 DAAs. If you have a cap of 50 or a cap of 49 or a cap of 72, only 11% are hitting their cap. So when I get complaints about why isn't the DAA cap higher, I'm going, well, I hear you. Some of my stores have hit their cap too, and yes, it's a pain, and yes, I wish it increased faster, but only 11% of pharmacies out of 5,400 are actually hitting their cap. The other 89% are nowhere near it. All right, trials. George and I have done the first thing, haven't we, George, for the agreement? There are no trials in the 7th Community Pharmacy Agreement because we only finished one of any of the trials in the 6th Community Pharmacy Agreement, and that is the diabetes screening trial. It is done, it is dusted. Thank you for those that have participated. Not only did it say that pharmacists can do more to help manage and screen in diabetes, but it actually said it provides good clinical outcomes and it is good value for money for the taxpayer. So hopefully we see some investment by the Commonwealth in the rolling out of that diabetes program more broadly in the 7th agreement. The rest, though, are including the chronic pain meds check and the healthcare homes trial, are in various stages and unfortunately will not be finished in enough time to form part of the professional service bucket for the 7th Community Pharmacy Agreement, but we still want them to be successful and hopefully they form part of something we can secure in the 8th. This is a Cos-Sclavos slide, which is why it is overwhelming and there is far too much information to absorb. So what this slide is to do is to actually say of all the stuff that are out there, all of the paid programs and all of the private programs, how much money am I leaving on the table? Now this is to show that even an average pharmacy, not one that is performing all of their maximum caps, should be claiming $111,000 worth of professional service funds a year. Now I just have to say, none of my pharmacies are doing that and I'm the guild president here, right? So even I have room for improvement. But I have to say this is only going to get bigger and the pressures on the dispensing function are only going to become more apparent. So I can't tell you that a 7th Community Pharmacy Agreement that George and I hand down and hopefully briefing you on around Christmas or in the new year is going to see that trend change. So if you are struggling with embracing professional services, then please get a hold of, where's Nick and the BDM team? Here he is here. So come and see the BDM team. They'll come out and see you and help find ways that you can embrace this because you're leaving an awful lot of money on the table. This is just to say that